Have you ever wondered why some engines sound like they're perpetually angry? Like there's a mechanical banshee trapped under the hood, screaming for freedom every time you touch the throttle? That's the intoxicating whine of a factory supercharger. While turbochargers have dominated the performance world lately, supercharged engines deliver something turbos can't: instant linear power with zero lag. Today we're counting down 10 factory supercharged engines you can actually buy on the used market right now. From American muscle to European luxury to Japanese precision, these blown motors are waiting in salvage yards and classified ads, ready to transform your project car into something truly special. So let's dive in. Number 10. Toyota 4 AGZZ 1.6 liter. Let's start with something unexpected, a supercharged engine from Toyota. Not exactly what comes to mind when you think about forced induction legends, right? But back in the late 80s and early 90s, Toyota was experimenting with something special, the 4AGZE. This was essentially their famous 4AGE twin-cam four-cylinder, but with a Roots-type supercharger bolted on top. We're talking about a 1.6-liter engine that was way ahead of its time. Toyota stuffed this little screamer into the AW11 MR2 and the AE92 Corolla 11 in Japan. The thing made around 165 horsepower, which doesn't sound like much today. But remember, this was 1988. Most Corollas were making 70 horsepower. The supercharger was tiny, about the size of a coffee can, but it transformed the character of the engine completely. No lag whatsoever. Just instant boost from idle to redline. What makes these engines particularly interesting for swappers today is their compact size and legendary Toyota reliability. The internals were beefed up from the factory with lower compression pistons and stronger connecting rods. The ECU was sophisticated for its era, with a primitive but effective boost control system. These engines have become cult classics in the JDM tuning world. People are swapping them into everything from AE86 Corollas to old-school Starlets. Finding one isn't easy. Most of the MR2s have rusted away or been crashed, and the 11s never made it to the U.S. officially. But they do pop up. Import shops occasionally bring in front clips from Japan. Expect to pay between $2,000 and $3,000 for a complete engine with the ECU and wiring. The aftermarket support is surprisingly strong, with companies still making pulleys, intercoolers, and even upgraded supercharger units. Some builders are getting over 200 horsepower from these little engines with basic modifications. The sound is distinctive too. It's not the aggressive whine of a big American blower. It's more of a high-pitched whistle, almost turbine-like. Very Japanese, very precise. And when you consider that this engine is now over 30 years old and still running strong in thousands of cars worldwide, it really shows Toyota's engineering prowess. They took their time developing it, and it shows. Number 9. Jaguar AJ126 3.0-liter supercharged V6. Moving from Japan to Britain, we have Jaguar's modern take on forced induction, the AJ126 supercharged V6. This engine represents Jaguar's attempt to downsize without sacrificing performance, and honestly, they nailed it. This 3-liter V6 pumps out anywhere from 340 to 380 horsepower depending on the tune, and it does it with remarkable smoothness. You'll find these engines in the F-Type, XF, XJ, and even some Land Rover models from around 2013 to 2019. The supercharger is a twin-vortex Roots-type unit that sits in the valley of the V6. It's incredibly compact and efficient. Jaguar managed to package this entire system in a space barely larger than their naturally aspirated V6. The engineering is genuinely impressive. What's really interesting about these engines is how accessible they've become on the used market. Jaguar depreciation is legendary, and that works in your favor here. You can find complete engines from wrecked F-types for around $5,000 to $7,000, sometimes less. That's 380 horsepower of British engineering for the price of a built Honda motor. The main challenge is the electronics. These engines are heavily integrated with Jaguar's vehicle systems. You'll need the complete ECU, body control module, and ideally the instrument cluster to make everything work properly. But people are figuring it out. There's a growing community of hot rodders dropping these into classic Jaguars, kit cars, even the occasional Miata. Yes, really. The engine is all aluminum, so it's surprisingly light at around 400 pounds fully dressed. It's also remarkably fuel efficient when you're not on boost. Jaguar claims 30 miles per gallon highway in the F-Type, which is insane for a 380 horsepower engine. The sound is pure Jaguar, too. It's not as aggressive as the V8, but it has this sophisticated snarl that's distinctly British. The supercharger whine is subdued at cruise, but becomes prominent under acceleration. It's refined, but menacing. Classic Jaguar. The main weakness is the cooling system. These engines run hot, and the supercharger adds even more heat. If you're planning a swap, budget for a serious cooling upgrade. Also, the timing chains can stretch on higher mileage examples, so factor that into your purchase decision. Number 8. Pontiac Bonneville SSEI 3.8-liter Series 2. Now here's a sleeper choice that enthusiasts have been quietly hoarding for years. The GM 3800 Series 2 with the Eaton M90 supercharger. This engine powered the Pontiac Bonneville SSEY, Grand Prix GTP, Buick Regal GS, and several other GM performance sedans from the mid-90s to mid-2000s. And before you dismiss it as just another boring GM V6, hear me out. The engine is virtually indestructible. We're talking about 240 horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque from a pushrod 5.6 that will run for 300,000 miles without breaking a sweat. The bottom end is overbuilt to an almost comical degree. The block is iron, the crank is forged steel, and the rods are powder forged. GM basically built this thing to last forever, then slapped a supercharger on top just for fun. The best part? These engines are everywhere and they're cheap. You can pick up a complete running engine for under $1,000, sometimes under $500 if you find someone who doesn't know what they have. The Eaton M90 supercharger is old-school roots-type technology, but it works. It delivers smooth, predictable boost from idle to redline. No sudden surge, no lag, just a steady wave of torque that builds progressively. The tuning potential is stronger than you'd expect too. The factory pulley is conservative. Drop down a few sizes and you're looking at an easy 30 horsepower gain. Add a cold air intake, headers, and a tune, and 300 horsepower is totally achievable. Some people are pushing 400 with built internals and larger superchargers. The transmission behind these engines, the 4T65E, is also surprisingly stout. It'll handle the power without complaint. The sound is distinctly American. It's a deep, throaty rumble overlaid with supercharger whine. Not refined, not sophisticated, just honest American forced induction. These engines have developed a cult following in the last few years. People are swapping them into Fieros, S10 pickups, even old Camaros. They're basically the small block Chevy of supercharged V6s. Simple, reliable, and everywhere. Number 7. Mini Cooper S 1.6-liter Tritec. Here's one that might surprise you. The supercharged engine from the first generation BMW Mini Cooper S. The R53 generation from 2002 to 2006. This 1.6-liter four-cylinder, co-developed with Chrysler and built in Brazil, is one of the most characterful small displacement engines ever made. And that's mostly thanks to its Eaton M45 supercharger. The factory output was between 163 and 170 horsepower, depending on the year and market. But those numbers don't tell the whole story. This engine is all about the experience. The supercharger whine is absolutely intoxicating. It sounds like a jet engine spooling up every time you accelerate. BMW actually had to add extra sound deadening to some markets because the whine was considered too loud. Too loud. Can you imagine? These engines are surprisingly robust if maintained properly. The weak point is the supercharger itself, which needs regular oil changes. Skip those services and the supercharger will eat itself alive. But keep up with maintenance and these engines will run forever. The aftermarket support is incredible too. You can get everything from smaller pulleys to complete supercharger upgrade kits. Some builders are getting over 250 horsepower from these little engines. What makes these particularly interesting for swaps is their compact size and the complete package you get. The engine, transmission, and ECU are all designed to work together as a unit. People are putting these into classic minis, Austin Healey Sprites, even go-karts. Yes, supercharged go-karts. The whole assembly is tiny and relatively light. You can pick up a complete drivetrain from a wrecked Cooper S for around $2,000 to $3,000. The driving experience is unlike anything else in this list. It's not about outright power, it's about the immediacy of the response and that incredible sound. The engine revs to 6,500 RPM, and the supercharger keeps pulling all the way. It feels faster than it actually is, which is exactly what you want in a small, lightweight car. The main issue for swappers is the BMW electronics. These systems are notoriously complex and don't like being separated from the rest of the car. You'll need to do some serious homework on the wiring side. Number 6, Mercedes AMG M113K V8 5.4-liter V8. Let's talk about German engineering at its most excessive. The M113K, Mercedes-AMG's supercharged 5.4-liter V8 from the early 2000s. This engine powered legends like the E55 AMG, SL55 AMG, CL55 AMG, and several others. It made between 469 and 574 horsepower depending on the application and year. But more importantly, it made absolutely ridiculous amounts of torque. We're talking about over 500 pound-feet of torque in most applications. In the SL65 AMG, it made 590 pound-feet. That's diesel truck levels of torque from a gasoline V8. The supercharger is a twin-screw Lysholm unit that's incredibly efficient. It builds boost progressively and predictably. There's no sudden hit of power, just a massive wave of torque that seems to never end. What's remarkable about these engines is their reliability. This was peak Mercedes engineering before they started cutting corners. These engines were overbuilt to an almost absurd degree. The internals are forged everything. The cooling system is massive. The oiling system could probably lubricate a small building. As a result, these engines regularly go 200,000 miles plus with just basic maintenance. The supercharger itself is practically bulletproof. The used market for these engines is interesting. Complete engines typically go for $5,000 to $8,000, which seems like a lot. But consider what you're getting: 500 plus horsepower and torque from a factory-engineered package that's proven reliable. The main challenge is the size. These engines are huge. The supercharger adds significant height, and the whole package is wide. You need a big engine bay. The electronics are typical Mercedes, complex but well documented. There's a strong community of people who have figured out standalone management for these engines. They're showing up in everything from old Mercedes sedans to custom hot rods. The sound is distinctly German. It's not as raucous as an American V8. It's more refined, more sinister. The supercharger whine is present but subdued. It's the automotive equivalent of an expensive suit hiding a bodybuilder physique. Number 5. Cadillac LSA 6.2-liter V8. The LSA is essentially the LT4's older, slightly less powerful brother. This 6.2-liter supercharged V8 made 556 horsepower in the Cadillac CTS-V and 580 in the Camaro ZL1. It's an LS-based engine with an Eaton TVS supercharger, forged internals, and all the GM performance goodies you could want. And here's the kicker. It's significantly cheaper than an LT4 on the used market. You can find complete LSA engines for around $8,000 to $10,000, sometimes less. That's a factory supercharged, 550-plus horsepower V8 with excellent aftermarket support and proven reliability. The LS architecture means parts are everywhere, and everyone knows how to work on them. The Eaton supercharger is a 4-lobe design that's more efficient than older 3-lobe units. It moves more air with less heat. These engines are showing up in everything. People are swapping them into trucks, classic muscle cars, even boats. The compact size relative to the power output makes them ideal for swaps. They're barely larger than a naturally aspirated LS, but they make nearly double the power. The torque curve is essentially flat from 2,000 to 6,000 RPM. It's like having a big block's torque with a small block's rev range. The tuning potential is strong too. A smaller pulley, cam swap, and headers will get you well over 600 horsepower. Some builders are pushing 700 plus with upgraded superchargers. The factory ECU is unlocked and tunable, unlike many modern engines. You can literally plug in a laptop and start making changes. The main weak point is the supercharger lid. The factory plastic unit can crack under high boost. Aftermarket billet lids solve this problem. The sound is pure American muscle with a modern twist. The exhaust note is classic LS rumble, but the supercharger adds this angry whistle on top. It's aggressive without being obnoxious. Well, unless you want it to be obnoxious, straight pipes will definitely wake the neighbors. These engines represent one of the best performance bargains on the used market right now. Factory engineered, proven reliable, massive power potential, and reasonable prices. Number 4. Jaguar Land Rover 5.0-liter AJ133 Supercharged V8. Here's another British beauty that's becoming a swap favorite. The Jaguar Land Rover 5-liter Supercharged V8, known internally as the AJ133. This engine powered everything from Range Rovers to F-Type Rs, making anywhere from 510 to 575 horsepower. It's all aluminum, compact for its displacement, and sounds absolutely. The supercharger is a 6th-generation Eaton TVS unit that's incredibly efficient. Jaguar spent years perfecting the intake routing to minimize losses and maximize response. The result is an engine that feels naturally aspirated until you look at the power numbers. There's no lag, no dead spots, just smooth, linear power delivery, idle to redline. The redline, by the way, is 6,500 RPM, not bad for a 5-liter V8. What's driving interest in these engines is their surprising affordability. Jaguar and Land Rover depreciation means you can find complete engines from wrecked vehicles for $6,000 to $9,000. That's 500-plus horsepower of British engineering for less than the cost of building a decent LS. The main challenge, as with most European engines, is the electronics. These engines are heavily integrated with the vehicle's CAN bus system, but the swap community is figuring it out. There are now standalone ECU solutions that can run these engines outside of their original vehicles. People are putting them in everything from classic Jaguars to Mustangs. Yes, Mustangs. The compact dimensions make them ideal for sports car swaps. They're actually smaller than many American V8s, despite the 5-liter displacement. The reliability is better than you'd expect from a British engine. These are fundamentally solid designs with good cooling and oiling systems. The main issues are typically sensors and auxiliary components, not the core engine itself. Keep up with maintenance, and they'll run for hundreds of thousands of miles. The sound is absolutely intoxicating, too. It's a deep, sophisticated, just enough supercharger whine to let you know it's boosted. Very British, very refined, but unmistakably powerful. Number 3. Ford 5.4-liter supercharged modular V8. The 5.4-liter supercharged modular V8 from Ford is a genuine sleeper in the forced induction world. This iron block monster powered the 2007 to 2012 Shelby GT 500, making between 500 and 550 horsepower depending on the year. It also powered the Ford GT supercar, albeit with an aluminum block and more exotic internals. But we're talking about the iron block version here, because that's what you can actually afford. These engines are absolute torque monsters. We're talking about 510 pound-feet of torque at 4,500 RPM. The supercharger is an Eaton M122, one of the largest roots-type blowers ever fitted to a production car. It moves an enormous amount of air, which is why these engines make such big power despite the relatively modest 8.5 pounds of boost. The best part about these engines is their untapped potential. Ford left a lot on the table from the factory. Simple bolt-ons like a cold air intake, smaller pulley and tune can get you to 600 horsepower easily. Go deeper with ported heads, cams, and a bigger supercharger, and 800 horsepower is totally achievable. The iron block can handle enormous power. Some builders are pushing over 1,000 horsepower on stock internals. The used market is surprisingly reasonable. Complete engines go for $5,000 to $7,000, sometimes less if you find one from a wrecked GT 500. That's a lot of engine for the money. The main challenge is the size and weight. These engines are massive and heavy. The iron block alone weighs over 200 pounds. You need a strong chassis and good weight distribution to make it work. But when it does work, it's magic. The sound is unlike any other Ford engine. It's a deep, angry bellow overlaid with supercharger whine. It sounds like it wants to fight everything. The power delivery is brutal but predictable. There's no subtlety here, just raw American horsepower. These engines are showing up in everything from Fox body Mustangs to F-100 pickups. They're particularly popular in drag racing because of their strength and potential. Number 2, Chevrolet LT46. 2-liter V8. The LT4 is essentially the ultimate evolution of the pushrod V8. 6.2 liters, 650 horsepower, 650 pound-feet of torque, and that's just the starting point. This engine powers the Corvette Z06, Camaro ZL1, and Cadillac CTS-V Blackwing. It's a masterpiece of modern engineering that somehow manages to be both cutting-edge and old-school at the same time. The supercharger is an Eaton TVS R1740, a 1.7-liter 4-lobe unit that's incredibly efficient. GM spent years perfecting the integration between the supercharger and the direct injection system. The result is an engine that makes massive power while still meeting emission standards and getting decent fuel economy. 20-plus miles per gallon in a 650 horsepower car is genuinely impressive. These engines are just starting to show up on the used market as wrecked C7 Corvettes and 6th-gen Camaros enter salvage yards. Prices are still high, typically $12,000 to $15,000 for a complete engine. But consider what you're getting. This is essentially a race engine that happens to be street legal, forged everything, massive cooling capacity, and the backing of GM's engineering might. The tuning potential is absurd. With just a tune and smaller pulley, you're looking at 750 horsepower. Add headers, cam, and ported blower, and 900 is easily achievable. Some builders are pushing over 1,000 horsepower on stock internals. The direct injection system can support enormous power levels. The main limitation is usually the fuel system, not the engine itself. The compact size is remarkable too. Despite the supercharger, the LT4 is barely larger than a naturally aspirated LS. It fits in virtually any chassis that can accept a small block Chevy. People are swapping them into everything from C10 trucks to Mazda RX-7s. The sound is distinctly modern muscle. It's refined at cruise, but absolutely vicious at wide-open throttle. The supercharger whine is prominent but not overwhelming. It's the perfect balance of sophistication and aggression. Number 1. Dodge Hellcat 6.2-liter Hemi V8. Was there really any doubt about number 1? The Hellcat engine is the most powerful supercharged production engine ever offered by an American manufacturer. 707 horsepower in standard trim, 797 in red-eye specification, and 807 in the jailbreak version. This engine doesn't just move the needle, it breaks it off and throws it out the window. The supercharger is a massive IHI unit displacing 2.4 liters. That's bigger than many car engines. It moves so much air that Dodge had to add a dedicated cooling circuit just for the supercharger. The thing makes 14.5 pounds of boost from the factory. The internals are forged everything: pistons, rods, crank. The block is iron for strength. The heads are high-flow Apache units designed specifically for forced induction. These engines are starting to appear in salvage yards as Hellcat Challengers and Chargers get wrecked by overzealous owners. Prices are still steep, usually $15,000 to $20,000 for a complete engine. But that's actually reasonable when you consider what you're getting. This is basically a race engine with a warranty. Well, it had a warranty. The point is, it's engineered to survive at this power level day after day. The tuning potential is almost irrelevant, because it already makes more power than most people can handle. But if you're insane, builders are getting 900 to 1,000 horsepower with basic mods. The factory supercharger can support over 1,000 horsepower. The bottom end is good for 1,500 plus. At that point, you're just showing off. What's truly remarkable about the Hellcat engine is how tractable it is. Despite the massive power, it idles smoothly, runs on pump gas, and gets decent fuel economy when you're not matting the throttle. It's perfectly happy sitting in traffic or cruising on the highway until you floor it. Then it becomes a different animal entirely. The acceleration is genuinely frightening. The supercharger whine sounds like the world ending. These engines are finding their way into everything, from classic Chargers to Jeep Wranglers to boats. Yes, Hellcat-powered boats are a thing now. The main challenge is containing all that power. You need a serious transmission, differential, and chassis to handle 700-plus horsepower. But if you can manage it, there's simply nothing else like it. The Hellcat engine is American excess at its absolute finest. And there you have it. That's 10 factory supercharged engines you can actually buy on the used market today. From tiny Japanese screamers to massive American thunder, there's a blown motor out there for every project and budget. Which one would you stuff into your project car? Let us know in the comments below. And hey, if you enjoyed this deep dive into forced induction insanity, make sure to like and subscribe. We've got plenty more content coming about engines that make too much power for their own good. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.